This country cannot go on the way it is going on if we are not willing to bring integrity to government, period. Hakuna stories zingine. Ati mnakuja mikutano, ati tuende president. What? I wish the president's people were here. County commissioner is here. Mwambie president, awachange kuongea uongo, nini. Tunamheshimu, tunataka afanye kazi yake, tunataka pesa haiwezi kufika kwa county. The county governments are only getting how much? 15%. The national government has taken 85%. Then what do you want them to do? Then you tell me I need to come here and clap for the president. Tell him, kura zinakuja miaka 2 sasa. Hata huyu mzee amelala hapa angemwambia hivyo. Because we must believe that we are going to manage our country prudently, honorably. There must be fairness and equity. We don't want where one MP is given 200 million, somebody is given $1 billion to do roads in his area. Jamaa wananunua helicopter, Land Cruiser ndio hizo tunabeba. Wamama wazee hakuna capitation, hakuna pesa ya maskini, hakuna pesa ya shule, walimu hawana mishahara. Aibo.
Super Senator Richard Onyonka has come out to strongly condemn President William Ruto on what is going on and the way he is continuously telling alleged lies. And in the reality, there is no capitation to the counties where they are getting 15%.
When you start seeing a government struggling with paying salaries, Eric, as you mentioned, you've seen some of the government's people on television talking about the balance between debt and salaries. What are the priorities? We are teetering on what is called debt default. And I think Kenyans need to understand what that means to our lives. Ghana recently, December, went through a modicum of debt default. They could not meet their debt obligations. So what did Ghana do? They went to the IMF. And the IMF told them, before we look at you dealing with your debts, the sovereign in your country must understand and feel the pain first. Yes, city. So Ghana calls in their bonds and says, now if you have a bond of 10,000 shillings, you now take it at a discounted rate of 30%. So it shaves off
people who had lent it domestically.
Yes,
basically
it shaves off 3,000 shillings and says 7,000 is yours. Now this 3,000, come back for it in 3 years. The next 3 years is 0% interest. But in 3 years, you come, we give you 3%. But it didn't stop there. They went to bank accounts. Because the threat of banks collapsing is huge. So they come to your bank account. They raid your current account. They do the same thing. Here, they will raid your M-Pesa and do the same thing.
What is raiding and doing the same thing? What does that mean?
It means that if you have a deposit in your M-Pesa of 10,000 shillings, they will take 30%. And you then have 7,000.
So your balance,
if you have a current account,
your balance suddenly becomes 7,000.
Becomes 7,000. Who is the sovereign?
It's you, the citizen.
How do you starve off a bank collapse?
You retain the cash.
You retain the cash. And that is coming to this country. That is our best case scenario.
That is our best
case scenario.
Right, I'm waiting for
But what has it happened? What has happened to Ghana in 4 months? You've had an inflation rate that went from 12% to 45%.
Yep.
So even whatever money you have left has become half its value on the market.
Right.
All right?
It's purchasing power.
The 7,000 that was left on M-Pesa is now worth 3,000.
3,000.
Yes.
This is where we are headed. And that is our best case scenario. If you see Greece, if you remember the issue of Greece, they closed the banks.
Literally.
For
with
4
people's
years.
deposit.
Your money was locked up.
Yeah.
Lebanon, they are still closed. And the currency has lost 90% of its value. Lebanon is still closed from 2019. Banks are closed. You're told, we'll give you a little stipend every month for you to try and exist. of money that is yours in your bank account. So our best case scenario is the Ghanaian situation. This is a reality to our lives going forward. And what are the implications of this? The implications mean that you cannot have the life that we are living today. However much we are struggling, this struggle will pale in comparison to what is coming. What does it mean in terms of jobs, confidence, salaries, and so on and so forth? This is where we are headed. And this is what we were trying to articulate last year when we did this audit. This audit was an analysis of our debt and the fact that it is going to choke us. Next year's repayments in the next financial year are also 1.4 trillion. Where is this revenue coming from? The following year, our repayments are 1.6 trillion. They keep increasing. I've seen some people say we have 2 years to recover the economy. We will not recover. As long as that burden is on us, there's nothing called recovery here. Because what are we going to do to commensurately produce the income to deal with that?
Apart from that, the biggest government critic, that is Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi, came out to strongly condemn what is happening in the country at the moment. He said that indeed there is a debt crisis in the country of Kenya and the government is struggling. We have seen the government officials talking about salary and other priorities in the government at the moment. For example, there was a debt crisis in Ghana and they went to the IMF and the citizens suffered the pinch. Even the domestic lenders suffered where 30% of the bonds they have given the past government was retained for later and it was given at 0% interest. And that's begs the question, are really we at a threat of corruption or still we have a future as Kenyan nation? We have seen the politics transition, people fight, people say this is what is happening. For example, we have seen how the parliament has really turned into a political machine rather than legislation. And that's begs the question. We have seen a very bold claim that 30% of the current senators will go home and 80% of the current MPs will never see the parliament again because they have come sold out and they have come very cheap machine for poor decision making rather than decision making. They have been political decision machine making which allegedly has been pushed by an agenda from the top where these people are influenced with some tokens to make decisions. That was alleged by some politicians. So there was also the bad university funding model by citizen which has been claimed that it is very partial and it has led to majority of the students to stay at home because they can't afford funding.